Word agricultural. Description related to farming and the production of crops and livestock. It describes practices, industries, or policies connected to agriculture, encompassing everything from cultivation to rural economies. It's often used in discussions of food production and land use. Phrases of example. First, it was an agricultural world, and a world of great simplicity. Second, the whole of the country was agricultural, and the people were farmers, and the farmers were the people. Third, he was a man who knew the land, a man who had an agricultural soul. Word born. Description means to come into existence or be brought into life. It refers to the process of beginning life, typically used to describe a person's birth or the origin of something. It's a simple way to state where or when something started. Phrases of example. First, you were born to be a player. You were meant to be here. Second, and so we are born, and so we die, and in between we live. Third, I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but I've had to eat dirt all my life. Word actually. Description means in reality or fact. It introduces a statement that contrasts with what was previously thought or said. It can emphasize a surprising or unexpected truth and is often used to correct a misunderstanding. Phrases of example. First, actually, I'm not a writer. I'm a reader and I'm a dreamer. Second, I actually believe that everyone has a story and that every story matters. Third, she was not actually beautiful, but she had a kind of beauty that was all her own. Word solid. Description describes something that is firm and not able to be easily broken, moved, or changed. It can refer to physical objects like rock or wood, or to abstract concepts like a plan or relationship, indicating strength and stability. Phrases of example. First, the world is not a solid thing, but a collection of perceptions. Second, a solid wall of silence descended between them. Third, the ground was solid beneath his boots. Word track. Description means to follow or observe someone or something, often over a period of time. It can refer to following a person's movements or monitoring progress towards a goal. It implies careful observation or pursuit. Phrases of example. First, they tried to track him through the dark forest, but he vanished. Second, we must track the movements of the enemy to anticipate their next move. Third, she began to track his progress through the online forum. Word respond. Description to say or do something as a reaction to something else. It means to give an answer, react to a question, or reply to a situation. It describes a reaction or reply, showing engagement or acknowledgement. Phrases of example. First, she did not respond to his greeting. Second, I cannot respond to this request. Third, he didn't respond well to the news. Word aside. Description means to move or direct something to the side. It can refer to physically stepping to the side or figuratively shifting focus to a secondary matter. It suggests a momentary diversion or a movement away from the main subject. Phrases of example. First, all pleasant things fade, and we must put them aside and go on. Second, he was a man who put all his feelings aside and lived as if he had none. Third, he put the book aside and looked out the window, and he saw a terrible and beautiful sight. Word Congressional. Description relates to the U.S. Congress, the legislative branch of the federal government. It describes things connected to or involving the actions, members, or processes of Congress, often used in political or governmental contexts. Phrases of example. First, the congressional debate centered on the contentious immigration bill. Second, congressional oversight is crucial for maintaining government transparency. Third, his testimony proved vital to the congressional investigation. Word communist. Description relating to a political system advocating for a classless society and public ownership of resources. It describes governments or ideologies centered on collective principles, often involving significant state control over the economy and social structures. Phrases of example. First, the specter of communism haunted the post. Second, his political views were radical, leaning heavily towards communist ideals. Third, the old guard resisted the communist revolution with fierce determination. Word still. Description indicates that something remains unchanged or continues to exist. It describes a state of being that hasn't altered or something that is continuing despite expectations. It can also show surprise at something's persistence. Phrases of example. First, I am still alive. I am still here. Second, the world is still full of suffering. Third, he was still a boy, barely grown. Word, oppose. Description, to actively resist or be against something. It signifies disagreement or opposition to a plan, idea, or person, often involving direct action or vocal dissent. It indicates a stance against something. Phrases of example. First, they opposed the king's decree with quiet rebellion. Second, he chose to oppose the system, knowing the consequences. Third, to oppose tyranny is the noblest of endeavors. Word, warning. Description, a statement or signal that alerts someone to a potential danger or problem. It's used to caution against something negative that might happen, prompting carefulness or preparedness. It can be verbal or a sign. Phrases of example. First, it was a warning, a desperate cry against the inevitable. Second, the raven's warning echoed through the silent halls. Third, a stern warning crossed his face, a silent plea for caution. Word, related. Description indicates a connection or similarity between two or more things. It signifies a shared characteristic, origin, or association. It's used to show how things are linked or have a common element. Phrases of example. First, he was related to me by blood, but not by affection. Second, we are all related to everything else, in ways we don't yet understand. Third, the patterns are related, always shifting, always connected. Word, bit. Description, a small piece or amount of something. It can refer to a tiny portion of food, a short period, or a single unit of information in computing. It's often used to describe something that is small or insignificant. Phrases of example. First, she was a little bit of everything, a little bit of nothing. Second, he was a man who lived his life a little bit at a time. Third, the whole world was a strange and terrible bit of a thing. Word, governor. Description, a governor is the elected leader of a state in the United States, holding a position similar to a president, but at a state level. They are responsible for enforcing laws and administering the government within their state's borders. Phrases of example. First, the governor was a thoughtful man and had a great many good qualities. Second, the governor looked out at the crowd, a weary expression on his face. Third, a good governor needs to be both strong and fair, they said. Word, shrink. Description, to decrease in size, number, or extent. It can describe a physical reduction, a decline in importance, or a contraction in scope. It often suggests a negative or unfavorable change occurring over time. Phrases of example. First, the memories shrink. They are no longer vivid, but they remain. Second, the world tends to shrink as we age, and our experiences become more limited. Third, his confidence began to shrink under the weight of his failure. Word, home. Description means to return to one's house or place of residence. It indicates movement back to a familiar and comfortable location, often after a period of absence or travel. It signifies a return to a place of belonging. Phrases of example. First, there's no place like home. Second, home is where the heart is. Third, I'm going home. Word, unveil. Description means to reveal publicly for the first time. It suggests a formal or dramatic presentation, often relating to a new product, plan, or artwork. The word implies a deliberate and significant disclosure to an audience. Phrases of example. First, the past is often a veil that hides the true nature of things. It requires courage to unveil it. Second, she would unveil the secrets of the universe, one equation at a time. Third, the truth, when unveiled, can be more terrifying than the shadows it dispels. Word, eye. Description, the organ used for seeing. It's a body part allowing you to perceive the world visually. It can also refer to a person's perspective or viewpoint on a situation. Phrases of example. First, her eye was like a dark blue sea. Second, they have eyes that see not what is, but what will be. Third, he looked at the world through his own eyes. Word, a. Description, used before a noun to indicate one single item. It introduces something new or nonspecific. It's used to talk about things that aren't specific or have not been mentioned before. Phrases of example. First, a long, rambling letter. Second, a story of a man who makes a deal with the devil. Third, a shadow of a man, thin and worn. Word, oblige. Description, means to compel or force someone to do something, often through a legal or moral requirement. It suggests a sense of duty or obligation, implying that someone is bound to act in a specific way, whether they want to or not. Phrases of example. First, I felt obliged to accept his invitation, despite my reservations. Second, she felt obliged to warn him, though she knew it would cause trouble. Third, the contract obliged him to maintain the property in good repair. Word, valuable. Description, means possessing worth, importance, or usefulness. It can describe something that has monetary value or something that is treasured for its qualities, like knowledge or a relationship. It indicates something is considered beneficial or significant. Phrases of example. First, the experience was valuable, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. Second, time is valuable, use it wisely, don't waste it. Third, a moment of silence is far more valuable than any words. Word, print. Description, refers to the result of producing text or images on paper or another medium. It can mean a physical copy, like a newspaper or book, or the process of creating such a copy. It is used when discussing published materials. Phrases of example. First, the early print was often blurred and imperfect. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, Susanna Clark. Second, the print of his hands was a ghost on the glass. The name of the rose, Umberto Eco. Third, the first print of the newspaper read that the trial would begin on Monday. Word, orchestra. Description, a large instrumental ensemble, typically composed of string, wind, brass, and percussion sections. It's a group of musicians playing together, often performing classical music in a concert hall or other venue. Phrases of example. First, the orchestra swelled, a wave of sound threatening to engulf her. Second, the orchestra played a mournful melody, reflecting the city's despair. Third, the concert orchestra was magnificent, the precision and passion evident. Word, annually. Description, means happening or done once a year. It describes something that occurs on a yearly basis, like a recurring event or a regular report. It signifies a consistent, yearly cycle or frequency. Phrases of example. First, the city of Oblige was beautiful, and its citizens were happy, but they suffered annually for a single child. Second, the company's finances were checked annually by a team of independent auditors. Third, they celebrated his birthday annually, a quiet affair with just the family. Word, organization. Description, refers to a group of people working together for a shared purpose or goal. It can be a business, club, or any structured group with a clear system or plan. It's about people working together to achieve something. Phrases of example. First, the organization of the family and the state is the natural order. Second, their organization was simple and effective. Third, The company's organization was a tangled mess. Word not. Description, used to negate or contradict a statement. It changes the meaning of a sentence from positive to negative. It's a very common word used to say something is untrue or doesn't exist. Phrases of example. First, it is not the answer to anything. Second, I do not like him, and I do not know why. Third, it is not our responsibility to fix everything. Word adjust. Description means to change something to suit new conditions or requirements. It can involve making alterations to improve functionality, comfort, or appearance. It also means to get used to a new situation or environment over time. Phrases of example. First, I must adjust my sails to the wind, not the other way around. Second, he had to adjust his expectations to fit the reality of his life. Third, you have to adjust to the fact that you're not a hero, just a man. Word sack. Description means to dismiss someone from their job. It implies a sudden and often unexpected termination of employment, frequently due to poor performance or misconduct. It can also refer to the act of firing someone. Phrases of example. First, they sacked the city, leaving behind a scene of ruin and despair. Second, the rebels threatened to sack the capital if their demands were not met. Third, the king ordered his army to sack the enemy's treasury. Word trace. Description means to find or follow something, often faint or indirect. It can refer to tracking a person, animal, or object, or finding the origin of something like a problem or a sound. It implies investigation or following a path. Phrases of example. First, he tried to trace the origins of the rumor, but it vanished. Second, they had to trace the path of the smugglers through the forest. Third, she tried to trace his steps in the snow, hoping to find a clue. Word carriage. Description refers to a vehicle, typically horse-drawn, historically used for transportation. Figuratively, it can describe something carried or conveyed, often suggesting a sense of elegance or tradition. It's a less common word in modern usage. Phrases of example. First, the carriage broke down, stranding them in the bleak countryside. Second, he hailed a carriage, eager to escape the stifling atmosphere. Third, the royal carriage approached, a symbol of power and privilege. Word parallel. Description describes things that are alike or run alongside each other without touching. It suggests similarity, correspondence, or occurring at the same time. It can be used to compare ideas, events, or physical objects that share a commonality or direction. Phrases of example. First, the parallels between their lives were undeniable, yet they remained strangers. Second, his ambition ran parallel to the law, but never quite touched it. Third, the two timelines ran parallel, each reflecting the other's pain. Word mostly. Description means primarily or for the largest part. It indicates that something is true in most cases, but not always. It's used to describe a general trend or characteristic that applies to a majority of situations. Phrases of example. First, mostly, I just like to watch the rain fall. Second, mostly, people are bad, but they are not necessarily evil. Third, mostly, they just stand there, these statues. Word warm. Description means to make something or someone feel less cold. It implies increasing the temperature of a person, object, or environment. It can also describe making a friendly or welcoming atmosphere. Phrases of example. First, he liked to warm himself by the fire, reading old books. Second, she began to warm up to the idea of traveling abroad. Third, the sun would warm the stone, and the flowers would bloom. Word king. Description, a male ruler of a kingdom. It signifies someone who holds the highest position of power and authority. It can also be used figuratively to describe a person who is the best or most important in a particular field. Phrases of example. First, the king is dead. Long live the king. Second, a king rules with a crown, but a leader rules with the heart. Third, the king must be just, but he must also be strong. Word, star. Description, means to cause something to shine brightly, like lights on a Christmas tree or decorations. It often refers to adding twinkling lights to something for festive or decorative purposes. It's a simple action to make something sparkle. Phrases of example. First, I wonder if the stars dream when we are dreaming. Second, we are but star stuff, William. Third, let us go then, you and I, when the evening star comes. Word, museum. Description, a place where you can see old or important objects, like art, historical items, or science exhibits. It's a place for learning and seeing things from the past or representing culture. Phrases of example. First, I went to the museum and saw many old paintings. Second, the museum was a place of shadows and echoes. Third, she imagined a small museum dedicated to lost things. Word, power. Description, refers to the ability to control something or do something. It can also mean physical strength or the ability to influence others. It's used to describe force, authority, or capability in various contexts. Phrases of example. First, power is a temporary condition, not a permanent state. Second, with great power comes great responsibility. Third, the true power comes from within. Word, gallery. Description, a space, often a room or building, where art, such as paintings or sculptures, are displayed to the public. It's a place for people to view and appreciate artwork or other visual creations. Phrases of example. First, the gallery was filled with portraits of the deceased. Second, she wandered through the art gallery, lost in thought. Third, the paintings in the gallery seemed to watch him. Word, supplement. Description, something that completes or enhances something else. It can refer to an addition to diet or income, or something that fills a gap. It implies something is added to improve or complete what already exists, not replace it. Phrases of example. First, a little supplementation of income can make a big difference in your standard of living. Second, the evidence provides a useful supplement to the existing literature. Third, this was no mere supplement. It was an essential addition to the truth. Word, musician. Description, a person who plays a musical instrument or writes music. It describes someone who creates or performs music professionally or as a hobby. It's a general term for anyone involved in music. Phrases of example. First, he was a musician with a guitar, wandering through the streets. Second, the best musician rarely gets the recognition he deserves. Third, she was a talented musician, playing soulful melodies on her piano. Word, secondary. Description, means less important than something else. It indicates a supporting or subordinate role, often referring to a consequence, consideration, or item that is not the main focus or priority. It's often used in comparisons. Phrases of example. First, it was a secondary consideration at best. Second, this was a secondary effect, a subtle change. Third, secondary roles can be just as important. Word, clear. Description, means to remove obstacles or make something understandable. It can refer to physically removing objects or making an idea or explanation easy to grasp. It implies making something free from confusion or blockage. Phrases of example. First, the sky was clear, the stars bright and numerous. Second, the matter was clear to me, and I had no doubt about it. Third, he wanted to clear his name and prove his innocence. Word, outing. Description, denotes a planned excursion or social event, often implying a deliberate departure from routine. It can also suggest exposure or revelation of something previously concealed, like a secret or scandal. Phrases of example. First, they planned a weekend outing to the countryside, seeking respite from the city's relentless pace. Second, the annual village outing was a tradition steeped in history and local identity. Third, their clandestine outing revealed a vulnerability they's usually kept concealed. Word, consumer. Description, someone who buys and uses goods or services. It describes a person who purchases products for personal use, rather than for resale or professional use. It's often used in business and marketing contexts. Phrases of example. First, the consumer is not always right, but they are always important. Second, a nation of consumers is a nation at risk. Third, the modern consumer is a citizen of the world. Word, port. Description, a place on a coast where ships can dock and load or unload. It can also refer to a passage or opening, like a door or window. It describes a harbor or a connecting passage, often facilitating movement or trade. Phrases of example. First, the harbor was a safe port in a storm. Second, a port of call, a fleeting moment. Third, we sailed into port, weary but triumphant. Word, dancer. Description, a person who dances, usually as a profession. It refers to someone who performs dances, often trained and skilled in different dance styles. It's a simple descriptor of someone who dances. Phrases of example. First, she was a graceful dancer, twirling across the stage. Second, the ballerina danced with a fierce determination. Third, he danced with a joyful abandon. Word, food. Description refers to any substance that can be eaten or drunk to provide nourishment. It includes things like fruits, vegetables, meat, and drinks, essential for survival and health. It's a basic need and a common topic in daily conversation. Phrases of example. First, give me food for my soul. Second, he had no food, but he had hope. Third, the table was laden with food and drink. Word, married. Description describes someone who has legally joined with another person as a couple. It indicates a formal union recognized by law or tradition. It's used to state someone's relationship status. Phrases of example. First, she was a married woman, and she had no right to complain. Second, he was a married man, living a double life. Third, my father was a married man, but he wasn't my father. Word, modern. Description means relating to the present time, contemporary. It describes things that are new or up to date, contrasting with older styles or traditions. It's often used for designs, technology, or ways of life. Phrases of example. First, modern times demand modern men. Second, this is a modern world, my friend. Third, it's a modern sensibility, I suppose.